Well, we had the Microsoft E3 presentation yesterday, and there were varying opinions around how good the presentation was, which for the most part comes back to if you liked the games that were there. My issues looking at it objectively, though, no release date for Halo Infinite, which was odd, and no gameplay for things like Starfield or Redfall. But one thing started to become pretty clear. This generation, it looks like it's going to be a bit more competitive than the last generation we went through with the Xbox One and the PS4. In fact, it actually looks like the positioning around cross-generation games has actually flipped completely, and we're going to go over that here today. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton, and if new here to the Spawn Wave Plus channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And I guess we're going to start with the overall idea of the Bethesda games and the fact that they will be exclusive to Game Pass, basically Microsoft's ecosystem. And this is something that was really the topic of conversation since Microsoft announced that they would be purchasing ZeniMax and Bethesda is, oh, Microsoft will still put those games on PlayStation. And a lot of that came back to Starfield. You know, we'll see where that game goes. Yeah, it looks like Microsoft is going to be keeping Starfield and basically all the Bethesda games going forward, outside of obviously Deathloop and Ghostwire, as Xbox and PC Game Pass basically exclusives. And it always made sense to me why they would do that, considering a lot's riding on these Game Pass subscription numbers. I don't know why they would be putting it on the PlayStation 5 because of that. So while I know there was a lot of reasoning going on online, people were trying to come up with for why they put on the PS5, well, there we are. Starfield's just going to the Xbox and PC. So hey, if you have a PC, you'll be able to play pretty much all of these games. You don't necessarily need an Xbox, but Microsoft doesn't really care if you buy an Xbox or not. They just want to get you into their ecosystem with Game Pass. That is the long game here that they are banking on, is that they can build this subscription up so that it can have 100 million, 200 million Game Pass users, and then they'd be bringing in quite a bit of money, actually, every year. But now we're starting to see something interesting from Microsoft, as it looks like they might be moving on from the Xbox One even a little sooner than I was thinking. I kind of thought they might be trying to push all the way through 2022, still supporting the Xbox One. However, yesterday, they just started to announce a bunch of games that would only be on like the Series X and the Series S first-party titles, and there are some other ones that are not coming out till like 2023 or 2024 at this point that, well, now we can assume are just going to be Xbox Series X and S games. And we're really hearing Sony go in the opposite direction, where games that people were thinking would be PS5 exclusives are also having PlayStation 4 versions created. Like, if you take a look at this here, this is a list that was being circulated on Twitter, and I looked at it and I was like, wow, that is actually kind of surprising to see kind of the script flipping here. And I mean, like, we can see the first party next generation only lineup with the Series X and S on the left and then PS5 on the right. Now, I want to point out, because this is very important, we actually have next generation games on the PS5 right now, and we don't really have any on the Series X and S from first party. In fact, a lot of the games underneath of that Series X and S logo, like, we don't even have a screenshot for, like Fable, Perfect Dark. I mean, who knows what those are going to look like? Even Redfall, you know, or Contraband. And it's like, that's great, but we're still a ways off from a lot of those releases. Now, Hellblade 2 is rumored to be shown later on this week at another showing. I don't know why it wasn't just part of the show that we got with Microsoft at E3, but maybe it's more of a developer kind of interview or sit down where they talk about the game. Anyway, the PS5, though, obviously, they took God of War off of there. They took Gran Turismo off of there, and we already knew after really ahead of launch that Horizon would not be a PS5 exclusive. But, like, you can kind of see now that Ratchet & Clank has released, there's no announced PlayStation 5 exclusive titles from Sony first party. The other games they're working on are all cross-generation, and really, Ratchet & Clank at this time, actually, you know what, I'm going to say Astro's Playroom, because they do quite a bit with that as well when it comes to the fast loading and the DualSense controller, obviously, as being big key factors in that game. I'm looking at some of these other games like Returnal, Destruction All-Stars, Demon's Souls. I mean, you could make the case that they don't necessarily feel next generation, but like at this time, Ratchet and Clank being out, there's certainly a lack of next-gen only games from Sony first party. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that like God of War or Gran Turismo or Horizon are going to be bad because they're cross-gen, but it has been brought up a lot that they'll feel like they are held back. And I'm just a little surprised because when we first started this whole thing up, you know, like leading up to these consoles coming up, that was the summer of last year in 2020, had this whole thing going on where Microsoft was the cross-gen company and Sony was the one who believed in generations and was pushing towards that with the PS5. And now we're having a bit of a role reversal here where Microsoft is surprisingly pushing hard towards the Series X and the Series S starting in 2022. I was positive the Xbox One would still be like a focus throughout next year because Microsoft said it's going to be a couple of years where they are doing that, but it almost feels like after 2021 ends, it's going to just be like Series X and S logos on all of these first-party titles going forward. Now, I also want to mention that I do think Sony is going to have some sort of event coming up here, possibly at the end of this month, even maybe beginning of July, where they could start to fill up their own list of next-generation titles. It's just we're kind of in this position now because Microsoft is at E3 and Sony is not, that when we sit down and start comparing titles, yeah, it's like, all right, I hope Sony's going to talk soon because Microsoft just listed off a bunch of games that are not available right now, but we would be looking towards in the future. I mean, if you think about it, Gran Turismo is not going to be necessarily a next-gen or a current-gen now only racing game. The racing game we look forward to for that would be Forza Motorsport from Turn 10 coming up at the end, I guess, of next year, as they say they're building the engine specifically for like the Series X and the Series S, take advantage of all of the new features that the consoles have. And this was kind of the thing that's been talked about is Microsoft bought a bunch of studios, and they have a lot now, especially after picking up Bethesda and ZeniMax. You kind of just tack on like another 8 or 9 studios on top of what they had previously been buying. You're going to get to a point where Microsoft is going to be coming out with a game every 2 to 3 months now, like a larger game even. Now, it's going to really come down to if that game is any good, because Sony obviously has the quality when it comes to their exclusives and their big-time releases, but they do take time to come out. And for this Game Pass subscription service to work, Microsoft needs to be consistently coming out with releases. I mean, when they mention 6 to 7 big releases a year even, yeah, they're going to need that just to keep people engaged and interested. You're also going to see, I'm sure, a lot of games like Halo, for example, that comes in with that multiplayer aspect to keep people kind of on board with that subscription service month over month. Like Ratchet and Clank has been an awesome experience for me, but I'm already like almost done the game. I think I'm going to have it basically platinumed in the first week of owning it. And then I don't know, I guess I kind of put it to the side and go on to the next PS5 game. That's one thing that I'm sure Sony is thinking about now, as they mentioned themselves, kind of a look towards live service-based games. And I think that's one of the reasons they're going to have something like a Last of Us Part 2 Factions mode that comes out, maybe separate from Last of Us Part 2. So that's going to be the biggest thing when we start going through, say, 2023 and 2024, and Microsoft has completely spun up, got all these dev cycles rolling along. You're going to see a lot of releases dropping from Microsoft. And at that time, it just comes down to, can they really light up the scores, say, with Metacritic and get that same kind of critical acclaim that we've become used to with Sony's first-party releases? But let me know what you guys think about this one down below. Now that we're finishing up here on Microsoft's side with E3, you may not have liked all the games or even a lot of the games that Microsoft had shown during E3, but then you kind of step back and look at their release schedule now going into 2022 and then even further into 2023, and it's starting to get kind of crowded. And the one thing I like about that means that it could end up being a very competitive generation that we are now in, which means we get some awesome releases from Sony and Microsoft. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.